Trichophyta, ferns and their relatives. Vocabulary. All italicized words are important vocabulary. True land plants. The members of the phylum Trichophyta are true land plants. Well, how? Well, they have evolved. Unlike their friends, the bryophytes, who live on land but depend on an abundant supply of water to survive, the creatures of the phylum Trichophyta have freed themselves from being dependent on wet environments. They don't depend on water environment to survive. As we are talking how trichophytes have evolved, we can't forget on the most important adaptations. Trichophytes have specialized tissues called the tissues. Vascular tissues transport water and the products of photosynthesis to the plants. There are two types of vascular tissues, the xylem and the xylem tissue that provides support to a plant and conducts water. From the roots, all parts of the plants, the phloem tissue is responsible for the transport of nutrients and the products of photosynthesis throughout the plant.
That was so close to screwing over. One important cell present in the xylem tissue is the trichard cell. It carries water from the roots of the soil to leaves in the air. The trichard cell keeps the plant strong. They have thick, strong cell walls that strengthen the plant stems and help them stand against gravity. That's the reason the trichophytes are so strong. All trichophytes have trichard cells. With the development of the vascular tissue, trichophytes have evolved true roots and true leaves. What's so special about true leaves and true roots? True roots have vascular tissues gathered in a central area called the vascular cylinder. True leaves are photosynthetic organs that contain one or more bundles of vascular tissue gathered into veins. Also, the leaves of the trichophytes usually have a waxy covering called a cuticle that helps prevent water loss by evaporation.
Before we move forward, let's go back and look at the history of the first vascular plants. Fossils of the Pistolophytes were found in the early centuries. Small creeping plants had primitive xylem and phloem tissues but lacked the true roots and true leaves. Botanists believe that they are extinct, but some still believe that two species of living plants, ferns, are living frostbites. Club mollusks and horsetails, only descendants of ancient land plants, Lysophytes and Cynophytes grow into 40 meters tall trees. The climate of the Earth changes and the primitive plants could not evolve faster, though they were replaced with a forest of other plants. The image of the right of the horsetail and the left is the club moss. The forest of the Lysophytes and Cynophytes grew into huge 40-meter trees.
Ferns are well-developed trichophytes. This is demonstrated by 4 reasons. They have true vascular tissues. 2. Strong roots. 3. Creeping underground stems called rhizomes. And 4. Large leaves called fronds. Ferns are found in wet or at least seasonally wet habitats. Commonly grown in the US, but grow the best in rainforests in the Pacific Northwest and West tropical areas. All life cycles of plants involve alternation of generations. Fern sporophytes produce haploid spores on the underside of their fronds. Spores are produced in sporangia. Clusters of sporangia are called sori. Reproduction in spores begins when the reproduction in ferns has 4 steps: release, germination, growth, and fertilization. Step 1. Reproduction in spores begins when the spores ripen and they are released from the sporangia. The spores may be carried by the wind or water over long distances. Step 2. If environmental conditions are right, not too cold, hot, wet, or dry, etc., the spores germinate into haploid gametophytes. Step 3. Gametophytes first grow roots like rhizoids, then flatten into thin heart-shaped green structures called prothelium, just like in the pictures. When the prothelium are mature, sperm are released. Fertilization can take place when the ground and the prothelium are covered with a thin film of water. Because the firm sperm have swim to the archegonia, the diploid zygote produced by the fertilization begins to grow in the zygote plant. The developing zygote quickly puts out its first fronds and then its creeping stems or rhizomes. As the sporophyte grows, the gametophyte withers away.
Ferns are well adapted to certain types of environments. Ferns are often found in the shadows of the forest trees where the direct sunlight penetrates the forest. Ferns are very important to gardeners due to their ornamental values. There are many different varieties of ferns that are planted or cultivated by gardeners. There are few types of ferns that are eaten by humans. An example of one of is the fiddlehead. Begin to emerge in early spring from fern fronds that look much like the top of a violin, a reason that they are called fiddleheads. If picked when they are young and cooked when they are fresh, they are considered a delicacy. Mosses are common in the areas that are damp most of the year. Mosses grow abundantly. Several kinds of mosses are grown in the gardens for decorating purposes. An example of one of is how mosses are often used as carpets in the Japanese style gardens. Mosses are frequently added to garden soil.
Sphagnum moss absorbs water that is many times its weight of its own weight, so it acts like a natural sponge. Sphagnum moss then decomposes and turns into peat moss. Thus, gardeners add peat moss to soil to improve the soil's ability to retain water. Also, it has a low pH value, so when added to soil, it increases the acidity. At one point, mosses were actually ground up and used by Native Americans to treat burns and bruises. Sphagnum was also used to add flavor to Scotch and whiskey. The mosses burned by the brewers in the smoke produced a burning moss that gives off a smoky taste. Roots. Roots perform very important functions. Roots perform several important functions. They absorb water, for example, they absorb water and are dissolved nutrients in most soils, anchor plants in the ground, and hold plants upright. They're able to do all these jobs because as they grow, they develop complex branching networks that penetrate the soil and that grow between the particles. Stems hold the leaves of the plant up to the sun. Plants compete with one another for solar energy, have tall stems and branches to reach above the other plants. They must be sturdy to hold such tall plants up to the sun.
What? Leaves, organs that capture the sun's energy. The leaves had to evolve because they needed a flat surface over to which chlorophyll were able to capture more solar energy than the plants that didn't have them. The plants produced more offspring. The flat part of the leaf are exposing a great deal of tissue to the dryness of the air, so the leaves are covered with a cuticle. Water cannot pass through the cuticle. The coating slows down the rate of evaporation of the water from the leaves' tissues. Adjustable openings in the cuticle help conserve water while allowing oxygen and CO2 to enter and leave the leaf. Plants evolve longer and longer stems, and distances between the leaves and roots increase. Water must be lifted from the roots to the leaves, and compounds produced in the leaves must be sent to the roots.
Okay, evolutionary forces of variation and natural selection produce a vascular system. Consists of two kinds of tissues, xylem and phloem. Xylem is a vascular tissue used to carry water and dissolve nutrients from the stems and leaves. Xylem cells often have thick walls that provide strength for the woody parts of the plant. Most cells grow to maturity die before they function as water carriers. Phloem tissues carry the products of photosynthesis. Phloem cells carry their contents either upwards or downwards. Phloem cells are alive and filled with cytoplasm.